Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, hi everybody, and good evening to you here from Finland. And today we are continuing our work with glamour, and we have maybe a little bit to read, maybe not so much this time, because we're on the verge of starting a new subject. And I don't necessarily want to start when we, have the old subject still in our minds. So we'll have a little bit of an alignment, and then we'll get into our reading. And as you go along, make notes about anything you might like to discuss or any associated idea that comes to you for discussion because of something that has been read, discuss, question, whatever. Okay, as all things are related to each other. Well, we have the big super map here, and it seems to take us onto the cosmic planes, when our highest spirituality is right here. The highest we can think of really at the moment is to do something within the spiritual triad, and eventually after the fourth initiation to come into greater contact with the monad. And then of course our great superiors, the Christ and the Lord of Civilization and the Manu, the 6th and 7th degree initiates who work here in Shambhala. But we have even a long way to go before we begin to be able to think in terms of these higher planes. It will be a long, long time, but then everything is filled with the spirit of adventure if we can think widely enough about the possibilities which ever are offered in each new universe. So let's just sort of in the silence we gather together. And our objective is to offer ourselves to do some work of clarification on that plane where the greatest delusion and illusion occur, especially the astral plane, though as we begin to clear one, the other planes that are more specifically to do with Maya and mental illusion also have a beneficial effect. And we'll be meditating today. All these glamours are so interrelated. They have to do with making that mistaken identification with the personality. We think we are what we see, what we feel, and the kind of concrete thoughts we think. We think we are that. And in fact, that's just a shell, really, compared to our inner being. And even the causal body is a shell compared to our inner being. And once we begin to abstract enough to reach identification with our inner being, we're well on our way to dissipating glamour and dispelling illusion. And Maya, specifically speaking, has been taken care of earlier. So we're here for service purposes and to learn a few things as we go as well. So let's just sound one Om to confirm our willingness to work. Okay, friends. Now, I just want to welcome you. And, I briefly try to do that. Just everybody accounted for, Alexandra and Anne-Marie and Annette and Antoinette, Ario, Barbara, Carl, Catherine, Chris, George, Jan, Yopie, Karen, Catherine, Lenny, Margot, Mariana, Mariut, Martha, Nathia, Nienka, Olivia, Risto, Stacia, Suzanne, Tiu, Winnie, and Yvonne and Zenaidi. Tuija's here too. Yeah, she's on the other side. Okay. And backing us up, Michael Stacy and B.L. Allison. When issues arise, and I forget something, or technical issues arise, and so forth. It's a great little book, This Glamour World Problem, and as you know, it was the second seed group, which he organized as a group of 9, and he basically wrote the book for their instruction, just as he wrote Education in the New Age for the instruction of the educators seed group. And well, of course, the healing book is so big, we have to wonder whether he wrote that. I think he wrote that for everybody, really. It's a huge book with so much amazing information in it, not only about healing, really an important book. And the book Telepathy and the Etheric Vehicle. We'll take up some of these subjects and we'll be reading through the books because it's very important at this time, with 6 years to go before the Great Conclave, that we remember all that the Tibetan has written. And, Alice Bailey has written important books on her own too. And we get into them and assimilate them, meaning to digest and understand and see the method of application before the Tibetan begins to write again. Because when he begins to write again, we will still, be using the Bailey books as they are right now, and we'll be using the Secret Doctrine, but our attention will also be drawn to the new dispensation. So we don't know, around the year 2025, and astrology, it turns out, will be a very important part of the revelation, he tells us. So, when we're doing that triangles work on the science of triangles, we're in the middle of the astrology book. And it's very important that even if we're not astrologers, and Alice Bailey was not an astrologer, that we gain some knowledge of the sources of those energies. And that's very important. So look at it as an opportunity. Now, maybe my reading will not be so long today. And our meditation will be on the glamour of self-importance. It sounds recognizable, doesn't it? It's all about these glamours which make us keep our eye on our little self, when DK tells us exactly the opposite. Take your eyes off your little personal self. Because when we are too fixated on our immediate vehicle, we just cannot think in terms of the whole, and truth is expressed in terms of the whole, and we fall victim to desires which are not in the best interest of the whole. So we need to expand our point of view so we can begin to identify beyond the obvious self. We're all familiar with our obvious self. It's the personal self, and we make the mistake of thinking that that's what we are. But we have to learn to diminish that little self until you can hardly see it at all. It's just an instrument for your group work and for working in line with the divine plan. Okay, so let's see where we were before here. We're on the reading number 47, and it's our 107th program. Just as a little segue, when an aspirant, that's all of us, reaches that point in his evolution wherein the control of the physical nature is an urgent necessity, he recapitulates in his own life this earlier battle. It's kind of a Lemurian battle, really, with the lowest pairs of opposites, namely the etheric body and the dense physical nature. It was the initiation that was offered in Atlantis. It was the first initiation, and it was the control, finally, of the dense physical, which was extremely insistent. It was a huge vehicle. In Lemuria, our vehicles were very, very big. To say that we were 60 feet tall in the vehicle is probably not an exaggeration. And everything has been going down in stature, but higher and higher in sensitivity and the mental quality. So we recapitulate then at the first degree our battle with the lowest of the pairs of opposites. Otherwise, if we don't win that battle, then physical instinct and the tendencies of the moon chain and of the earlier system run away with us. And then we're able to begin then to discipline our dense physical nature, and not to get hung up on those things too, because DK tells us, look, you're all caught in your physical disciplines, he says, for many people. And he says, what about your emotional disciplines? What about creating emotional loveliness? That's how he discusses it. Or real light in the mind, so that you can have a mind held steady in the light. So, it is necessary, of course, to control the physical nature, but we cannot let it become an obsession. And many people, who are on the path, they just concentrate only on doing the right thing physically, and they miss out on some opportunities to recondition the higher aspects of their nature. Transmutation, physical. Transformation, emotional. And transfiguration is mental. So, we can see that at the third degree, the mind takes on a whole new aspect. Now, the great majority of DK's students were in the phase between the first and second initiation, which is considered to be the longest phase and one of the most difficult. Everybody has to assess this for himself or herself, but that's where the people were. And it was the rare disciple in his group of 50 or 51 who was actually taking the second initiation. Okay, so let's, excuse me, looking for water, but there isn't any. All right, making a broad and sweeping generalization, he says, it might be said that for the human family en masse, this dense physical conflict was fought out in the World War I, which was the imposition of a tremendous test and discipline. Sometimes we say, did this really have to precipitate? I don't know about this war. He certainly tried to keep the Second World War from precipitating onto the physical plane, But as long as it did, it put millions of people to the test to see whether the higher energies coming through their etheric body could hold the instinctual energies of the dense physical body in check. Now just think, you're in World War I, you're going over the trench, the machine guns are shooting, some people never get more than 2 steps and they're dead. Everything in you instinctually wants to run the other way. But something coming into the etheric body, mental control, emotional focus, maybe alignment with some kind of spiritual faculty, says, no, the physical body cannot have its way. I have to go forward no matter what. And I think a lot of us in our spiritual training will discover that we do have to go forward no matter what. DK says, look, the loss of a life is not such a big thing. He says, there's a lot worse things than physical death. The death of the spirit, the death of your consciousness, the death of your value system, these are all far worse. So, I've been doing some work here in the externalization of the hierarchy, and he's constantly saying to people, look, you have to do whatever is required, even if it leads to the loss of your physical plane life, and may seem a little bit harsh, but then he sees it from a different point of view. So right there was a battlefield taking place between the etheric body, which had all of these carrying the energy of the higher vehicles, and the physical body, which was just instinctual and needed to be controlled. So and we can say, well, too bad that war precipitated. But on the other hand, because it did, we'll see in a minute a little statement about the war in Atlantis, and you'll get what I mean. Because it did, new opportunities were offered to humanity. So the hierarchy does everything it can to keep these wars on the psychological plane, but then when they do precipitate, it seems Shambhala gets involved and new opportunities are offered. Remember, he says, that our tests and disciplines are self-imposed and grow out of our limitations and our opportunities. So it's not like some teacher or commander or what a general comes along and says, you must do this. The real esoteric test is imposed by your own soul-infused mind, you might say, or what you know to be correct. That is what really imposes the test. And this is interesting, this World War test, because remember, this was written in the 30s, so there was not yet a Second World War. The result of this test was the passing on to the path of probation of a very large number of human beings, owing to the purging and purification to which they had been subjected. So, that's a real sentence there. And even though the whole process was kind of horrific, all of that trench warfare, they did pass on to the path of purification, which meant there was aspiration, there was control of the dense physical body growing, and a higher sense of values took the place of the ordinary human sense of values related to the fourth kingdom. Something of the fifth kingdom was coming through. I'll read it again. The result of this test, think about tests in your own lives where you're really, put against the wall, really. The result of this test was the passing on to the path of probation of a very large number of human beings, owing to the purging and purification to which they had been subjected. Now, obviously, whenever you're dealing with war, you're dealing with will, and to a certain extent, you're dealing with Shambhala. What comes out of Shambhala, purification, I mean, it's all the first ray, but purification, ray 2, destruction, ray 1, and organization, ray 3, in terms of the 1, 2, 3. So purification, ray 2, destruction, ray 1, organization, ray 3. This purificatory process, it's kind of interesting. After you die, the Catholics have a way of saying, well, you're going to purgatory. And, until you are purged of your sins before you are judged. Well, that purgatory idea is probably true in a way because we drop a lot of our lesser desires, and we learn to see through them, and we are no longer afflicted by them. So we are purified, we are purged. This purificatory process, in some measure, thank you. Tuija brought me something to drink here, and I'm grateful. Okay. This purificatory process, in some measure, prepared them for the prolonged conflict upon the astral plane, which lies ahead of all aspirants prior to achieving initiation, real initiation of the third degree. In our solar system, it is the prolonged conflict between the soul and the personality fought out on the astral plane, which is the main thing. The earlier fight between our etheric system and our physical system actually pertains to the previous major solar system, and it pertains to the Lemurian race, through which probably a lot of us passed. On the other hand, every one of us, almost every one of us, has passed through the Atlantean experience, and that is the real Arjuna experience. That's the battle of Kurukshetra, and it's on the emotional plane, and we have to win that battle. And like the warrior Arjuna, we have to throw the weight of all of our abilities on the right-hand side, and on the in the favor of those parts of our inner family which are aligning with the higher spiritual possibilities. And I may have mentioned it, but it's the Mahabharata, which is the great epic regarding that battle of Kurukshetra. And I don't know the details, but there's a very, very long movie, 5, 6, 7 hours long. It's very long, which acts out that whole process that's going to go on in every one of us. There's no way to escape the fight. We are members of the fourth kingdom of nature, and every one of us has the Arjuna experience where we finally throw our full resources on the side of the soul, and then the lower drag down into the lower personal self is one. We no longer have that particular tendency. Okay, this is the Arjuna experience, and real initiation is the third initiation, which, as you know, is the first major initiation. Now, he says this is an interesting point upon which to ponder, and explains much of the difficulty in the sequence of human unfoldment. In other words, there's a battlefield waiting for us, and being a member of a warring kingdom under Scorpio, think of it, our monads are expressing under the greatest sign of battle, which is Scorpio. So we cannot escape this fight between the higher and the lower principles of ourselves, and that's why we are called adjudicators, those who judge, adjudicators between the pairs of opposites, the vertical pairs of opposites, soul and personality. The individual aspirant is apt to think only in terms of himself and of his individual tests and trials. He must learn to think of the mass occurrences and their preparatory effect where humanity is concerned. These wars in the 20th century and the war that is currently going on the psychological plane have to do with the conflict between the dweller on the threshold of humanity and the angel of the presence of humanity. The battle is on. And if, you know, and what Master DK said, you know, he talked about it, he tried to get people to really take sides, and then he finally said, see that you battle, he said. So that's, you know, that's the fourth ray. And, you know, he also said, look, if you're not having a crisis, why aren't you having a crisis? It means you're not pushing ahead far enough, fast enough, strong enough to have the next crisis, which gives you the next opportunity for growth. Okay, so learn to think in terms of all of humanity. The world war, and it's not over, even after, well, you know, everything comes in threes, but our victory will be if it does not precipitate onto the dense physical plane, but is handled on the psychological plane. The world war, and that's World War I now he's talking about, was a climaxing point in the devitalizing of the world Maya. So basically, there are all these chaotic forces, you know, you have this veil of impulsion, forces are pushing you around, and they're not directed from your mind held steady in the light. And finally, you have to get rid of the vitality of all those forms that push you in the wrong direction and control your life from the higher point of view. And what it means is that Saturn takes the place of Earth in your throat center. Now, there is a great being consisting of 3 planetary logoi. It's a third ray being, and if you go to Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2, around page 99, right in there, you're going to see this great third ray being. The Earth is its physical body, Mars is its astral body, and Saturn is its mental body. So you get rid of it by really focusing in Saturn, and then only the forms of activity that you intend and that you will are the ones that are propelling your personality, and not all of this chaos. Much force was released and exhausted, and much energy expended. Much was consequently clarified because people, they were in a mess before that war, and DK said, you can never have the new age if things as they were before World War I continued as they were. It was a very myopic situation, and lots of glamour was mixed into it as well. So these wars have been expiating experiences. By the word expiating, I mean releasing and then negating. So you get rid of these tendencies, get rid of the myopic tendency, get rid of the glamour tendency, get rid of the illusion tendency, and then you've got a vehicle that really can begin to respond to the higher energies. Many people are occupied today in their individual lives with exactly the same process and conflict. Now, you know, when we get ready to go through initiation number 1, the initiation of the threshold called the birth of the Christ in the heart, our sacral center and our throat center are related, our heart center is coming under stimulation, and we are going through exactly what he said. Now, maybe a lot of us have done this in a previous life, maybe some of us are doing it in this life, and maybe some have it as an immediate possibility before them in the next incarnation. Many people are occupied today in their individual lives with exactly the same process and conflict. You know, is your etheric body so regulated that your physical body will do only what the higher principles dictate? Everybody has to ask themselves a question. On a tiny scale, that which was worked out in the World War I, is worked out in their lives. They are busy with the problem of Maya. Now, you know, the glamour of busyness is related very much to the third ray, and to the whole Mayavic setup, and kind of to the planet Mercury, which runs here and there and so forth. They are busy with the problem of Maya, and hence today we find an increasing emphasis upon what? Physical cultures, disciplines, physical training, such as is imposed in the world sport. It's a great training of the will, of course, in athletic exercises and military training. Now, when we look at all these things, we may say, oh, well, I'm not interested in all that. But it is a stage which really helps people, get their will focused through the etheric body to make the physical body perform in a certain manner, which is according to the dictates of the higher energies. So it really has its place. When you look at the Olympics, there's marvelous shows with the Olympics and how they carry the torch and all those rituals. That is training for initiation, very definitely. Now, in spite, he says, of all the wrong motives and the terrible and evil effects, speaking again with a wide generalization, the training of the body and the organized physical direction of the youth of the world today in all countries, particularly the military countries in Europe, and of course, that was in the 30s, it was all heating up, is preparing the way for millions to pass upon the path of purification. So let's just think about that. It's not just about one country fighting another. This is training. The training of the body, think of the training that goes into gymnastics and some of these sports, that require all your focused will. Now, maybe some of us have passed this by in a previous life, maybe not, but you can see how a higher design is working itself down into the forms and activities which the physical body takes, and thus overcoming Maya. The training of the body and the organized physical direction of the youth of the world today in all countries, particularly the military countries in Europe, is preparing the way for millions to pass upon the path of purification. Now, I think when this was written, DK could see ahead the possibility of a precipitated war. They worked so hard in the mid-30s with the energy of goodwill. There was a climax of a great second race cycle, and they made every attempt to avert war through the use of love and goodwill, and it wasn't enough because the disciples and the aspirants of the world were caring a lot more about other things and not upon what DK was directing them to do. So here he's talking about path of purification. Is this a hard truth, my brothers? Because a lot of people look at all this and it's military, and they say, well, there's nothing in it. It's just a bunch of regimentation to show ego and power and all the rest. But no, it's a training. Humanity is under right direction, even if during a brief interlude they misunderstand the process and apply wrong motives to right activities. And that's a real, that's something that we can meditate upon as we judge what kind of lessons are being learned by people as they pursue various things. When you get into the arts, you're singing, you're dancing, you're acting, whatever you're doing, this is a tremendous training of the emotional body. This is a way of making the emotions responsive to the soul. And, you might look at the lives of some of these people and say, hey, they're completely out of control, but the sensitivity is being produced, which will make possible the mastery of the emotional body by the soul. Now, here is the thing that I wanted to read. I had a little trouble finding it, and I finally did find it. And the idea here is interesting. Now, this was, he was comparing stimulation. And this, I often quote this because it just shows you that maybe Master Moria's little mantram, which, you know, can send chills down your spine. He says, the worse, the better. The worse, the better. Oh boy. I don't know that we like to hear that. A still more terrific stimulation was given in the fourth root race during the war of that period. And it was really a big one. And the result was the passing on to the path of initiation of many who normally would not even now be treading it. So, you know, if you want to ponder that, you know, turn to page 652 in a treatise on cosmic fire, and that is something really worth pondering, because sometimes we see that these horrific things that happen are, you know, have some kind of possibility in them, which is very rare. A still more terrific stimulation was given in the fourth root race during the war of that period. I think it was, you know, the fourth sub-race of the fourth root race. We'll have to consult Philip Lindsay on that in his Hidden History of Humanity. And the result was the passing on to the path of initiation of many who normally would not even now be treading it. And that was 4 million years ago. So, you know, war is hell, and war is all kinds of pressure that you'd rather not deal with. But every disciple is destined to fight an internal war between the higher and the lower parts of his or her nature. This is what it is to be a member of the fourth kingdom of nature, and to be a member of the fourth grade of hierarchy called the initiates under Scorpio and under that fourth ray planet, Mercury. And that's who we are. Anyway, so I put that over here, and it's in the chat box. And if you want to copy it down, I think you can do that. If I put it down twice, then whatever, you know, just you can find your way there. All these points we shall later take up in greater detail when we come to our third section and begin to study the modes of ending glamour, illusion, and Maya, the modes of doing that. At present, I am only occupied with giving you a general picture and a slight something. It's not a slight 41, something's wrong there. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is. Maybe someone can look it up. Maybe is it understanding? It's not that, but something like that. Of the tabulation or expansion of the tabulation found in this book on page 41. So that's what he's doing right now. Study it with care and memorize it if possible, for in its right understanding lies for you much real usefulness. And I want to point out that DK, having a lot of third ray himself, points to the value of memorization. And, you know, in the old methods of education, you force the student to memorize this, that, and the other. There's something good about it, because then you know it by heart, and it's always at your fingertips, and you can see the connections much more easily than saying, hey, wait a second, I've got to run to the book, and then you try to find your place. There are certain things which need to be memorized. You've got to memorize all 7 rays, what they mean, all the 12 signs of the zodiac. You have to memorize. You have to memorize the sacred and non-sacred planets. You have to memorize the major triangles which are in effect affecting humanity. Don't be afraid of memorization, because then you carry it with you and you can use it at will rather than delay yourself while you go hunting for something that should already be inside your mind and your heart. Okay,
Michael,
now, yes, Michael.
it's a slight elaboration
Go
of the
ahead.
tabulation.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. I was getting close, right? Expansion, not too bad. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Thank you for that elaboration. All right, good. I knew I missed it when I put in that number 41. Something happened. Slight elaboration. Okay, anyway, he takes you back a few pages and you look it over on page 41 and you memorize. Now, you know, if you're memorizing, takes you out for a walk with a little piece of paper in your hand, and you walk and you memorize, you walk and you memorize, great. That do whatever is necessary. But have in your mind the most important facts and factors without always having to run to the book, because that's really building something in your causal body. Thank you, Michael. I would like to, wait a second, I've got to get this straight. I would like to point out, in connection with the problem of Maya, that one of the first steps to its right handling is physical coordination. Isn't that interesting? In other words, like a number of actors, maybe some of you have been in acting, and there was this great teacher of acting called Stanislavski. He did method acting, and I forget what his first name was. But he's, you know, behind this whole authentic acting rather than mechanical acting. And he would have you go through the actions of the person, the character you were portraying. And then from the actions would come the emotions and the thoughts associated. Now, that's one way of successfully working from the outside in. It's a bit like acting as if you know what I mean. So physical coordination can bring about eventually the coordination of other aspects of your personality, and it will hook into the integration of the personality. So one of the first steps to handling Maya is right coordination. And when you see somebody, you know, who's all kind of loose and not coordinated and all that, you just know that that personality is not integrated. So we can work with the seventh ray upon the patterns on the outer plane, which allow us to integrate the personality. Hence the emphasis laid upon this today in the training of children, because many people come in, you know, not terribly integrated, or they've had experiences which have hurt them in the past and disintegrated their personality life. Hence the emphasis laid upon this today in the training of children. Hence also our use of a similar process in terms of alignment when dealing with the work of meditation and the effort to produce increasing soul control. In other words, you're not just slouching around, you're not in a totally casual position. There's a certain posture, if I can put it that way, to correct meditations. So, that's not right. Sorry. So let me get this correct, and then I'll be able to do this in the right way. Just 1 second, and I should have it. And okay, so let's just say it's one of the means of yoga is called posture, and maybe it's called asana or something like that, you know. So there is a posture factor here, that you maintain the right physical attitude in order for other aspects of your nature to get into alignment. All right? So students would do well to have this in mind and to ponder upon the following phrases. So let's ponder together. Physical coordination, hence physical education and sports and all that, very important. Astral orientation, the green stalk of many flowers arranges that the flower follow the sun. And you've seen the stalks of the plants bending towards the sun. We need not to be oriented horizontally, not to be oriented towards that which is low, but to be oriented towards the sun in the sky, which is the soul. And it doesn't mean we can't handle what is horizontal or what is below. It's just that our energy and our direction comes from above. Mental direction. We don't want to have one of those minds that's just all over the place. We have an objective and we focus our mind upon it. And the sequence that I will give you is this: concentration, Leo; meditation, Virgo; contemplation, Libra; illumination, Scorpio; inspiration, Sagittarius; initiation, Capricorn. And then it goes on, you can say in a way, inclusion, Aquarius, and identification, Pisces. All those I's, Anyway, or universalization, Aquarius, and identification, Pisces. So all the way from concentration upon a particular thing where you deflect all other distraction until you reach the point where you are the very thing that you are contemplating. Mental direction. And finally, personality alignment. Everything is all lined up. Soul, mind, brain, and the astral body is not out of alignment. So from the magical soul all the way down to the brain can come the intention of the soul. So this is another thing to memorize: physical coordination, astral orientation, mental direction, personality alignment. These are all attempts to express the process of right activity, and that's myopic, right? In other words, because Maya is wrong activity, impulsion, chaos, disorientation, all that. Right activity upon the path of return. This return is the objective of the human family and the culminating goal of 4 kingdoms in nature. Everything has to reach the kingdom of the soul eventually and then go beyond. We could enlarge the concept by expressing the truth in the following manner. Now let's see what we have here. Okay, the process is physical coordination. The correspondence is the mineral kingdom, and the obstacle is Maya. In other words, Maya is the obstacle to physical coordination, and there is a correlation with the mineral kingdom, the lowest kingdom. Astral orientation, and the obstacle is glamour, and the correspondence is the vegetable kingdom. Mental direction, and it's illusion, which is the obstacle, and it correlates with the animal kingdom. All this can be meditated upon, and should be. Personality alignment, and the obstacle is the dweller on the threshold, and this correlates with the human kingdom. Now, what I want to say is all of these lists and tabulations that he has, they are not there for nothing. They are there for a real purpose to organize your mind. Now, mental organization, why not? What is the hierarchy? Here's the definition: the society of organized and illumined minds. The society of organized and illumined minds. You study with Master Decay long enough, and in the right way, your mind will become organized under the responsive to the archetypal organization above. These processes have therefore the equivalence in all the kingdoms and lead to what? And this will be the end of our reading today. Number 1, the unfoldment of the divine consciousness. It starts in the mineral kingdom. The divine consciousness is it's logoic. As you would say, the let's see, logoic plane in relation to the lowest plane. That's really the divine consciousness is found on the highest plane. But I mean, obviously it's not only that. The divine consciousness gets more and more intense as you get onto the cosmic planes and all the rest. But you and I do not have the divine consciousness. We are beginning to have the spiritual consciousness. Next, the expression of the soul. This is typified in the vegetable kingdom with its uses and beauty. Note Venus. Okay. So the soul is particularly connected with Venus and the vegetable kingdom. The manifestation of the Christ, this is Buddhic, this is the recognized goal of the animal kingdom, which works towards individualization. Let's just say in the, in the individualization of the animal kingdom lies the promise of Christ consciousness eventually. First the human kingdom, and then the kingdom of souls. And that's, well, it's not going to work. Sorry. I sometimes have the code and sometimes I don't. The fifth kingdom of nature. There's a code. Okay, and the revelation of the glory of God. This is transfiguration. This is the objective before humanity. It starts with the third initiation. So, we can study these and see the different kingdoms that are connected with this. And this is probably the human kingdom here. So, okay, DK has given us some wonderful stuff to ponder. And this is the end of what we do today. And next time we'll go into what's called, and this will be very interesting, the glamour upon the higher mental planes. And it'll be called the dweller on the threshold. And he will, well, there's so much glamour around the subject of the dweller on the threshold. So he will help straighten that out for us. And what we've just been dealing with here, these processes, physical coordination, astral orientation, mental direction, personality alignment, etc., they all lead to their equivalents in the kingdoms and lead up to, okay, divine consciousness, soul consciousness, Christ consciousness, because remember, the soul has to be more and more infused with buddhi, and in the beginning it isn't. So the buddhic value of the soul keeps on increasing as life goes on. And then the revelation of the glory of God, who knows where that takes place, it's in a way in the transfigured personality, but it goes beyond that. It's the monad, and finally the great glory of God. Okay, so that, now let's see if I got lost here. I don't think so. That is the beginning. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, this is the time to either speak up if you're on the other side, or raise your hand if you're on the left-hand side. And then, and Michael will help me, and it looks like, what have we got? Suzanne here. Okay, so Michael, if I missed something, you can let me know, okay? So here's Suzanne. Do we recapitulate all previous stages, initiations in each life? The answer is basically yes. And now it's just a question of recognizing the recapitulation. It may not be quite as strong as the actual taking of the stage or the initiation, but it will fit right in line with what it's supposed to be. And some of it, you go back over your life and see what some of these high spiritual moments were. Maybe they were a recapitulation of a previous initiation. Like I say, there's a lot of students studying Master DK's work for whom the first initiation lies behind them, maybe not so far behind, because we do have to remember that even among DK's accepted disciples, there was one who did not take the first initiation. Everybody had before that. And if so, what are the signs of entering the new stage upon the path? Struggle. In other words, you'll just flow into a recapitulation. It'll descend upon you. But when you have the objective of a new stage, it's going to be a wrestling match between the point of tension you have achieved and the point of tension which lies ahead. And in that struggle and burning ground before each initiation will be the indication that this is a new stage. And of course, look at the planets too. Turn to page 7071 of Esoteric Astrology, and you'll see what planets are involved, what rays are involved, and analyze your present struggle. There's not going to be any initiation or new stage without a struggle between the lower of the pairs of opposites and the higher. So struggle and crisis is the indication of growth, especially if a spiritual objective is involved. Okay, I hope that helps a little bit, Suzanne. But, you know, review your life. Just, you know, those high points. I remember a point in my life when I recapitulated the first initiation. I remember that. And it was just something that happened to me, and it just came suddenly. I realized this is not new. I knew what it was. So you may find those kinds of things as you go along. Okay. Now, what else? What else? Your thoughts, your questions, your comments, whatever. I'm looking for you. It's not such hard material, right? But you can say something. Don't be daunted. And remember, anything goes. If it's in the field of occultism and you want to bring it up, then bring it up. Like I say, it's nice when we can have some questions on the material we've read, but on the other hand, if some question is burning in you regarding occultism in general, then just, you know, say so. It's okay. I'm looking for you. Or do I when I say that, is it okay? Yes, I hear a voice. Okay.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised or questions posted.
What would you like to say, Michael?
Good job, Michael.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Okay. Well, look, you know, here's the thing. Master DK is a master teacher. But he really expects of us that we kind of see what he has offered us, and that it triggers something in us which may be of interest, right? So the principles are clear. We are a personality, we are a soul, we are a triad, we are a monad, okay? These are the principles, and there has to be an alignment on the path which leads from being strictly a ordinarily personally conscious person to one who is aware of himself or herself being a soul, to one who is aware of himself or herself being that more expansive planetary something we call the spiritual triad. And finally, the day comes, and it's not the end, okay, of being aware of ourself as the one, which is the monad, as that interior being who is identical with every other being. That comes about, and there's still more on the great and, well, it's not an endless path because universes keep on coming and going, but, you know, considering the number of Earth years involved in the progress, it might as well be a virtually endless path. And we've been at this forever. So the whole idea is, how do we live? I put this question to myself. How do we live as a soul rather than just as a personality? Or if we're struggling somewhere in between, how do we recognize that? what do we really have to do to live increasingly as that interior being that we call consciousness on the higher mental plane? That's our objective, and later higher objectives will occur. So,
Michael, perhaps the test is not in the struggle itself, but in how we respond to the struggle.
well, okay. And this is the thing, you know, he basically says, make your own struggle. He says, push ahead so hard that it creates resistance in that through which you are pushing. And then the struggle will automatically descend. And of course, once the struggle is there and we recognize the opponents, whether it's soul and personality or a dweller and whatever, then how we respond to this is, of course, of great importance. We can be in the middle of a struggle and be lost in the struggle and not have the right response at all. I mean, you have to look at humanity sometimes and you say, oh my goodness, there's no consciousness here of what are the real possibilities that could emerge and the negative effects which could emerge. So making the right choice from the midst of the struggle, which is a self-induced struggle, is what is important, making the right choice. And that's why Libra really rules the path. It's the path of correct choice. And it also rules the royal road to Shambhala. So all of those things are involved, and we always have to choose correctly at every point of choice presented to us. Now, I do see Alexandra here. Oh, yes, dear, go ahead, then I'll let Alex go. Yeah, go ahead, Tuija.
Yes, while you were talking earlier about the war and now about the struggle, I was just reminded by DK in Initiation and Human and Solar, where he tells about our early times for human beings, that hierarchy was like artificially stimulating or dividing the mind, or stimulating the division in the mind in order to produce in man a condition that the discrimination is developed. That's and how that will force us to develop the mind quicker. And when one is just looking all of that how important the faculty of mind is, that without developed mind, the mind which can first grasp things, it's like it has to become the explainer, and then it is also the transmitter. The higher energies must be transmitted, and without the faculty of the developed and organized mind, the higher energies cannot enter into the lower world. And it is so important. But on the way that it can happen, we have to be also able to explain to ourselves what is this process, what is happening. So in that sense, it's all the time we see how important it is to develop the mind, and that's why this effort by the hierarchy has happened, that this division was like strengthened and made stronger.
Yeah, the discriminating mind and the discerning mind, they're right here on this map at the fourth subplane and the third subplane. And look, a man who was a physical and emotional being in the Atlantean period entered the Aryan root race, the fifth root race. And the kind of thing you're talking about here became extremely important. Now, there's just a lot of people today that are still walking around in the Atlantean consciousness. And they have to be taught not only the mental methods, but a little bit later on, They have to be taught how to use the mentality in the light of the soul. And that's what we call, focusing the mind held steady in the light. And that's where Raja Yoga comes in, and, disciplines of that nature. So that's why DK is offering a tough system, because there's a lot of people that prefer the Neptunian mystical approach. I mean, it's good, it's part of the whole picture, but you can't just stay there. This business of using discrimination and discernment eventually turns into something very interesting. Let's see if I can just find it here for you all. Let's see. Okay. Yes, it turns into a combination of these two master planets of Neptune and Uranus. And a true member of the hierarchy has both. There may be leaning towards one or the other. The masters of the wisdom lean towards Uranus, and the lords of compassion, like Master Serapis and Master Jesus, they lean more towards Neptune. But both of these have to be put together. And, occultism has been quite weak in a way when dealing with the mind. And that's why a lot of people reject DK, because it's very mentally demanding. And even students can fall into the trap that they use the mind and not the heart. And that's never what DK said. The Venus connection between mind and heart is of the utmost value. So when we move on to a new area of discipline, we cannot forget the foundation, the point of tension that we are leaving behind, because it's still our platform. So one day we will reflect all the three synthesizing planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn, and we will be fit for membership in the hierarchy. But when people say, "Oh, Master DK, he's so mental," well, just try to explain that mentality really begins on the atmic plane, and that it's necessary to enter that way in the higher worlds. And the Buddha had a cosmic mental touch up on the cosmic mental plane. And I would say to people who say, "Oh, you're so mental," I say, "Wouldn't you like to be like the Buddha?" Because that's what he did. Okay, thank you, Tuija. Now we go, I had Alexandra, and here you are. Go ahead, Alexandra.
Yes, hello, thank you. Thank you. This whole subject of struggle really speaks to me. And it's really a blessing to recognize that struggle and challenges and crises are equivalent to growth, because I think this is coming into common psychology now more these days, but up until now it's been pretty much the attitude in average life that there's something wrong if your life isn't going smoothly and everything isn't clicking together. And so it's quite satisfying to know, to have that acknowledged. But following that question about recapitulation, I was wondering if you could say more about recognizing these struggles. Like you said that you recognized you knew that was a recapitulation. Could you speak more about that?
Well,
I'd like to understand the process.
I think the recapitulations come pretty much as an attainment rather than a struggle. So for me, there have been certain recognitions in my life when I say, this I have attained. I can stand on this. This is a plateau. Now, what is the step further? And when the step further is involved, there will be a conflict between points of tension. Now, let's just say, well, okay, there's a reasonable control of the astral body by the time one is taking the second initiation, and you have mental illumination, and spiritual intelligence. Okay, those two things have to be attained. But then to take the third degree, it's got to be intuitive instinct, not spiritual instinct. So you're coming into the range of developing the intuition and trying not to mistake it for something else. There were very few people in the Tibetans group that had taken the third degree. It's pretty sure that Alice Bailey did and that Roberto Assagioli did. I can't say with certainty that any others had achieved that. It's just very high. But let's just say, is this person a great expression of the light? When Christ, in the body of Jesus, took those three disciples into the desert, he appeared as a great luminous being, and symbolically they bowed before him. He demonstrated the light, and it's the light of identification. It's the light of inclusiveness. It's the light of participation in the lives of many. That's a struggle coming from the ordinary position of I am I, you are you, and that's that. So we have to study the qualifications of each initiation, and then with as much honesty as possible, measure our apparent attainment against those qualifications. But like I say, the main answer to your question is that the recognition of an achievement descends, and not the presentation of some kind of life and death struggle for the next step. You've been on that burning ground and you see it, so that's how I would say there is a recognition of something that you have achieved, which is a recapitulation.
And the next step is the big challenge is recognizing what's going on here, what's actually being presented to me, and then after that is the choice, and as Michael says, how you deal with it. But that's a real burning ground. Is sometimes you just don't see what it is that's actually presented to you.
Recognition, revelation, vision. Yes. These are really important things. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to just turn to a certain page, and I'm going to recommend that everybody go there at a certain point. And, let's just say on page 70 here, from the planetary perspective, this is what you want to know. Yes, Jim.
I did also want to say a few things.
Okay. Well, let me just follow up. I'll call on you in just a second. Okay. Look, because it relates to what Alex was saying. Disciples upon the path are strongly influenced by Mercury and Saturn, one bringing illumination, the other offering opportunity. Is this true of me? At the first initiation, the disciple has to contend with the crystallizing and destroying forces of Vulcan and Pluto. The influence of Vulcan reaches to the very depths of his nature, whilst Pluto drags to the surface and destroys all that hinders in the lower regions. Is this happening to me? At the second initiation, the candidate comes under the influence of three planets, Neptune, Venus, and Jupiter. The three centers, solar plexus, heart, and throat, are actively involved. What is happening in my astral body to bring in these second ray energies to tranquilize and harmonize the astral body? And then this one, at the third initiation, the moon, veiling a hidden planet, I suggest Vulcan, and Mars bring about a fearful conflict, but at the end, the man is released from personality control. And then here at the fourth initiation, which doesn't really concern us so much, Mercury and Saturn, again, bring about great changes and unique revelation, but their effect is very different to the earlier experience, because basically you're discriminating between the real and the unreal. And then it goes on to the fifth initiation, so forth. So basically, what I'm going to do is just, I'd like to make that highlighted because I'm always coming back to it so much. Now, there's one other place that you'll want to consult, if I can find it. It's in the rays and the initiations. And, okay. Ancient control, maybe that's it. Okay. Hope I can find it. No, of the, it's on page 600 and something, and let's see, how would I find that? I always look for this thing, and I can't find it at the moment. Ancient, threefold, ancient personality. Maybe that will do it. And then I'll try to go very, very fast through that. And if I don't find it, then I'll find it for you. There it is. All right, this is it. This is the kind of, wait, someone is moving their mic quite a bit and breathing into it. Don't breathe, anybody. Okay. Here it is. Now, test yourself with this one. Birth, freedom from the control of the physical body and its appetites. 2, baptism, freedom from the control of the emotional nature and the selfish sensitivity of the lower self. 3, transfiguration, freedom from the ancient authority of the threefold personality, marking a climaxing moment in the history of all initiates. If every initiate that claimed to be a third-degree initiate could fulfill half of this, it would be something. And then number 4, renunciation, freedom from all self-interest and the renouncing of the personal life in the interest of the larger whole. Even soul consciousness ceases to be of importance, and a more universal interest of a larger whole, and a more universal awareness, and one closer to the divine mind takes its place. And on it goes until initiation 9. So just study this, turn to page 686 and 687 in the rays and the initiations, and you'll see some of the things that might indicate to you, I am struggling with this. This is my next task. I am having to master this and achieve this type of freedom. Okay, Alexandra, that's something. And of course, the books are filled with it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, now Tuija, you had something there? Go ahead.
Yeah, just for Alex, from the like a practical angle about this, that when we think about each incarnation, so it's so easy to look that when we are in the incarnation, there is something that we have to strengthen within us, something what is not yet achieved. So the soul has not yet achieved to take the control over the personality, over those lower lives. So there is the conscious effort, and there must be a conscious effort. The further we go, the further conscious we have to become in order to build into our body the needed vibrations. So there is a direct relationship to the law of vibration and of construction. How do we build them? So in that sense, every time when the soul is incarnating, it goes through those stages what has been gone earlier. It's like the tests what we took in the lower classes. We will take again in the beginning of the next round, the next class. And then we start again the new incarnation, and we try to transmute the ignorance into knowledge, and this experience into the faculties what we are building. So we should build them consciously, and the effort what masters are looking, that the first man is doing by itself without help, and then when that is seen in the aspiring disciple or aspirant, then also these higher ones become interested. The soul becomes interested in that sense. What we mean that the solar angel or the master, that there is now, Michael was talking about the light, now the light is increasing, and then we start to get help in the inner worlds. And that is how the struggle is taking place in the life, because there are the forces which will come from the personality and from the lunar life, which is trying to stop the process because they want to keep their own vibration. And then the incarnating soul is pushing forward through the faculties of the mind, that we would be gaining more control of the lower lives. And that's why there will come the confrontation. But that is exactly the needed confrontation. But it's like that we have to, I think that there is related also the memory, that we don't remember exactly. And I think for that is related that if we don't remember, then we are not conscious, and then we don't have this kind of conscious understanding about these lower forces. And we should become all the time more and more conscious about these lower forces. How do we actually take a control over them? And then it becomes like a real building, like if we think about masonry, the idea of masonry is about building the house. And that is how we are building our own temple more and more consciously, and draw these vibrations that we need.
Yeah, it's like the rays.
Thank you.
How do you tell the difference between a ray that you've been given in this life by the choice of the soul, or a ray that was very strong in a previous life? You'll be able to stand on the ray of the previous life. It'll be an attainment. It'll be the most natural thing, and it will start to express itself first. And if the ray of the present life is new to you, then it may even seem like the previous ray is stronger. But eventually, one takes over and moves in its own direction, and the previous one begins to subside. You just have to watch yourself very carefully to see when this is taking place, when a new ray emerges, when an easy use of a ray begins to subside. It's the same thing. It's also the same thing between an orthodox planet and a sacred planetary ruler. The same thing is involved. One subsides and the other gives the new experience.
Yeah, Michael,
okay, Chris.
I was thinking also this, when we talk about these rays which are pouring in and fading out within us, and what TK always emphasizes about the group activity. And I think the group activity is also related to that this evolution is hastened. How do you say, hastened or hastened?
Hastened.
Yes, yeah. Because then everybody knows about the group work. And I think that is exactly one of the points why Master is suggesting and trying to put us to understand why it is so important to be in the groups, because there are so many different ray structures and energies that we are facing that, and that is making us again to recapitulate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Look, people can see things. He calls it, can you withstand the group gaze? He says, you're so busy psychologizing people. can you stand in the middle of the group and have the eye of the group upon you? But the eye of the group will reveal many things about yourself and may make the whole process faster. I still have a couple of people here that have asked questions. Chris asks, is there a tone associated with each of the initiations? And I will in general say yes, and a chord that is associated with initiation 8, and 9. Now, what we have to do is look at the ray that is the main ray for that initiation and find the tone that is associated with it. I have an article I once wrote on music and esotericism, and I presented kind of an estimation of what tones were connected with what rays. But you know, let's just say that, to give you an example, 7th ray is vitally important in the first initiation. Look at the note B natural. In the second initiation, it's the 6th ray. Look either at the tone C or maybe A flat. With the third initiation, it is the 5th ray. Look particularly to the note A that the orchestra tunes itself to, and possibly to a certain extent to the orange note D. For the 4th initiation, it's the 4th ray. Look to the note E, the Buddhic note, the yellow note. You know, C, you know, I mean, I could even play them on this pitch pipe here, but, you know, look to that note. And for the 5th initiation, it's the 1st ray, and DK sometimes tells us it is the note D. You know, when Bach wrote this, this big organ fugue, you know, he wrote it in the key of D, and it's a very powerful 1st ray statement. So sometimes orange, sometimes red. It's a question of, do we go to D or C? The answer is basically yes. There is an overarching tone connected with each ray, and it would have to have some kind of connection with the initiation. But then later, you know, there's also astrological signs which have their own notes, and you can create a chord out of them. So in this article I wrote long time ago, I deal with that kind of thing. And let's just say, if you want to bring on the soul, then the 2nd ray, which is the blue, associated with the blue note, can be used. It is the note G. It's, you know, it's not as straightforward as we might think, unfortunately, because you know, it depends on whether you start on an A, start your scale on an A, or start your scale on a C. Because sometimes he says the note G is connected with the 7th ray, which would mean you started your scale on A, and then you went up the scale until you got to G. Da 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 D, and that would be the G, which would be 7th ray. But the general answer is yes, and has it been worked out so that humanity really knows how to use it? Yet, I would say no. Anyway, it's a good question, and it involves the tones associated with the rays and with the astrological signs. And I get into some of this in this article. Okay, then Yvonne, what percentage must be controlled at the first 2 initiations? 25% atomic matter at the first initiation, 50% atomic matter in the vehicle at the 2nd initiation, 75%, excuse me, 75% atomic matter at the 3rd, and 100% atomic matter at the 4th, which is probably why the vehicles disappear in the personality. If you've got 100% atomic matter in your physical vehicle, it's gone, you know. It's just an etheric phenomenon. So that's what he tells us. At each initiation, another 25% of atomic matter appears in the vehicle. And you know, that's really interesting. And one day when we are esoteric scientists and can really see inside the different rays, colors, vibrations, and all that, see atomic matter like Leadbeater could do, you know, or see molecular matter or all the different subplane matter, then okay, we will see it for ourselves. But he's given us this indication rising by 25% each time. When the fifth initiation is occurring, there's just no more personality and no more causal body, and so we're into a different type of measurement. Okay, Yvonne, I hope that is a useful thing, and let's see if there's anything else, because we've got to get into
Natnia's hand was raised a while ago.
And who is that?
Natnia.
Nadia. Okay, okay. Let me Natnia. I got it. I hope we got to pronounce that correctly, and you can tell us how. Natnia. Okay, there you go.
Okay, I just wanted to tell you it was elaborations and the word.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Then you tipped me off, and Michael tipped me off, and thank you for when it disappeared. It disappeared when I did it, but thank you, because sometimes when you're putting in a sentence, a necessary word or two disappear, and then you wonder where'd they go. So I appreciate your offering that. And how do you pronounce your first name?
Oh, I pronounce it Natnia. It's a made-up name. I liked it the way you said Natnia, but you say it how you like.
Okay, but it's not Natnia, or no, it's made up, is it? Oh, so it's your own creation. Okay, very good. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Natnia, or Natnia. Thank you. Okay. All right, everybody. Now let's get on. I think let's meditate, okay? Let's do that. All we've got to do is find the meditation, right? And it's got to be somewhere, doesn't it? Oh, here we go. Got it. So it's going to be, the glamour will be self-importance. Well, that's a big one, because DK says, hey, take your eyes off your little personal self. And you know, there are just people in the world, and we've all been one of them at some time or other. They're always looking at their little personal self and the effect that self may be having upon others, and they are aware that they're being observed, and they want to be observed in a certain way and present a certain image. And of course, the result is that you begin to live the self-centered life. But it's not a self-centered life at all. It's a not self-centered life. In other words, you're not dealing with yourself, you're dealing with your not self. Of course, you know, from another perspective, everything is the self. But when it comes to working forward step by step, you have to divide. I think Tuija was talking about discrimination. You have to discriminate what we call the observer self and everything else, the not self. Now later, we will discover in contemplation and in identification that whatever we thought was the not self, it actually was the self, because there's just nothing else but the self, nothing else but pure being. But on the way to get there, we have to split things. So we have the subject and the object. Now look, Descartes, the French philosopher and mathematician, he never got beyond splitting things. It was just the Cartesian dualism that he ended up with, the observer and the observed, the self and the not self. This is as far as he went. Maybe, you know, I can't talk about his interior life, or whether he knew more about that or whatever. but he had a huge fifth ray and third ray, and they tend to really split the self from the not self, the subject from the object. But later, a truly wise person, like the Christ, he puts it all back together and finds there's only one self in everything. Now, we can talk about that till we're blue, blue is good. If you got to be something, you might as well be blue. But we can talk about it glibly and not be able to do it. So we have to work on doing that. And no one's really going to take the third initiation until they can do that. That they can get rid of difference and find the one in the many, with the one being foundational to the many. Okay? Okay, well, someday we'll deal with those 7 mantrams, which are so important. And the second ray mantram ends with the words, as I've often said, and we each have to know how to do this before we can really take the third degree. Naught is but me. Naught is but me. Well, think about that, because mind alone will not do the trick. Something else has to be activated to make that true in our consciousness, but mind is a part of it, of course. Okay, world glamour. Here we go. All right. So we'll just be quiet with each other for a while. All 33 of us at the moment, comes and goes a little bit, but good number. So you feel the group kind of coming together in the same space of consciousness. In the silence, that happens because silence tends to synthesize. We're not really going to go through, all 33 names here. That's more for when you're doing that with a few people, 3, 5, 7, or 9, But we protect ourselves and realize how important that is, because we're dealing with the most powerful area to which so many people are susceptible without knowing it. So we're going to use the lighted cross, which is the divine cross of divinity, as he says. And we use this little mantram, and you can kind of say it yourself, or in a whisper, or however you want to say it. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. So we each have that lighted cross before us, and the whole group, as the one being, has that larger lighted cross. because on the astral plane, truth and reality and the soul are extinguished often, and we have to make sure that doesn't happen as we do this work. Now, we will make 3 lights into one. We raise up the light of matter to the lower mental plane. You do this in your imagination. And we blend it with the light on the lower mental plane, the light of reason and logic and analysis. Two lights are blended. And then we look towards the soul, as if above, the soul light. Maybe we feel it above the top of our head or something. It's a real thing. And bring it down. Bring it down onto the lower mental plane where we normally think, and blend it. Blend the soul light with the 2 lesser lights. So it's like 3 lights are 1 light. And we'll begin to get the feeling that this, the light is very real. It starts in the imagination, but it ends up being a reality. And then we say, followed by the sacred word, we say, the light is one, and in that light we shall see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Three lights are one. Then the formula. And as we're saying the words of the formula, DK tells us that the group members visualize the great searchlight that they have created, turning its light upon the astral plane. So that's what the imagination does. Radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. So as these words are said, that searchlight is on, doing what DK said it would do. Now we strengthen our beam with spiritual will. Because this beam is an instrument of perception and a weapon of dissipation. It has to be strong. With power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. Now, the group is protected, and the beam detecting the glamour is out there on the astral plane, and this weapon of light is ready to work. So first he asks us to name the glamour. It's the glamour of self-importance. It's not really the self, it's the lower self. And we are going to throw our light against this glamour, however we may visualize it. And we use these words of power. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of self-importance. The power of our united light negates the quality of the glamour of self-importance from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour. Now, we will continue to visualize the light of our beam penetrating into the glamour of self-importance and producing its weakening and dissipation. This will be done in 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose. And we see the work proceeding in our own way. 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose as we weaken and dissipate the glamour of self-importance. the glamour of self-importance. Every human being has a gift to give within the divine will. And it's important that every human being give that gift in correct proportion, not to exaggerate, not to minimize, but to see Libra balancing one's gift with all others, and not looming too large in your own field of consciousness, until one day we become what is said in Leo, and this is the sign where a lot of trouble comes from, but we become the relinquished point. And then it is the real self that is important, and not the false little self. So we together now withdraw our beam back onto the mental plane. Back into the triple light, and those lights go to their appropriate place. And we continue to work together, detecting the glamour and visualizing its dissipation and its gradual disappearance. And thus we clear the astral plane for the perception of reality. So now let us sound the Om 3 times, realizing mental, emotional, physical, illusion, glamour, and Maya, that some help has been offered in clearing the situation. If you will study the etheric veil of impulsion, the etheric veil of distortion, and the etheric veil of separation, you will find the way that Maya, glamour, and illusion make their way onto the physical plane. We keep working on our own distortions, our own illusions, our own chaos, and we help the world accordingly. So we who are sponsoring these meditations, Olivia, Tuija, and myself, on behalf of the University of the Seven Rays, we thank you for attending. We look tomorrow for a broadcast on the soul of nations. with readings from the Destiny of the Nations, and on Sunday for attracting financial resources for the work of the hierarchy. The full moon period is coming up. There are lots of activities going on, lots of webinars and broadcasts. We're going to be doing the sacred pentagram work around this full moon in Pisces, in Aries, rather. And there will be the important equinox, the Aries equinox, and there will be the pre-full moon astrological meditation and the exact moment full moon meditation, and all of that. You know, you should have that, and we'll make sure that we get some reminders sent out to you. And we just have to keep working at this the way esoterically trained people work. Together, individually, and in group formation, we use the methods the Master gives us, and we manage to help somehow. We'll see you soon, and all of these meditations will be posted on Makara, and eventually also on the YouTube Memoria Federation Esoteric Education channel. But you'll be able to access them and tell your friends about them, and they can benefit perhaps by thinking along with us and doing the work. Okay, all the best to everybody. Lots of love, many blessings, and we'll be working with you soon again. Bye-bye.